Okay. Okay. Hey guys, this is episode 3 of King of Cups, Sponging Out Is A Maritime. This is a buried treasure, almost. I had came up with this idea way before I even started King of Cups, and Alan Marcus, who we have here tonight, helped resurfaced it on Weaving Spiders episode 99. Which was a very nautical, fun surprise. And here we are going to expand upon it, go deeper into it. So we have just watched Alan Marcus, Andy, Crone, and I have all just got done watching the sequel to this first SpongeBob movie, SpongeBob the movie Sponge Out of Water. So before we get into it, let's have our two guests introduce themselves. Alan, did you want to go first?
Yes, I am Alien Marcus. A real webpage, alanmarcus.com.
Nice. And
I stand with dolphins.
Andy, did you want to introduce yourself?
I don't think we're hearing audio.
Yeah, I don't think we're hearing audio.
Oops, there we go. I'm Andy. I'm also known as Cozy Crone or Andrea in the Telegram. If you're on Telegram and follow Chris or Alan stuff. Or Spiders. I'm usually on Spiders. So.
Yes. So, before or to start us off more like it, I thought I could read my initial post about this movie that Alan read on Weaving Spiders 99 really quick. I thought that could be a good starting off point. And so I wrote, this was July of 2021. I wrote, so while I was at a family event tonight, they had SpongeBob playing on the TV as we all talked. For the kiddos and younglings, even though they was too busy playing, my gaze kept turning back to the TV. I haven't watched SpongeBob in years. I've only seen the characters through memes. But I noticed strange maritime law messaging going on. So let me describe what I saw in the bit I caught. To start off with, the subtitle of the movie, Sponge Out of Water, sponging out the holy sea or current sea. That sea as in SEA. You have Mr. Krabs, a Cancer water sign that's emotional. He's obsessed with currency money. It rolls his emotions. To obtain a steady flow of currency, he creates a formula, or as he pronounced it, formula. Sounds like familiar, which he used to sell Krabby Patties, possibly a necro spell maybe, which he has a monopoly on, which every character loves. Then when Plankton, a green mono-eye, dupes Krabs, giving him a coin, which is his last cents, since he used all his money trying to steal the formula in the past to try to get more money. He hides inside. He tries to steal the formula so he can monopolize it. He fails and loses it when Mr. Krabs can't sell any more Krabby Patties, the town turns into a mob, or like lunatics, moonblood-sucking arachnids, which the residents of Bikini Bottom are always dim-witted, maybe because they're under the law of the sea, that he promises Krabs, then promises a slight discount if they help him get it back from Plankton, who he thinks has it. So the whole town becomes the typical mainstream Hollywood perverted version of anarchy, or dirty bottom, as SpongeBob calls it. But there's no Krabby Patties, so no currency flowing, no current flowing. When SpongeBob believes Plankton, they try to form a team, or as Plankton, the green mono eye says it, a TM. And he repeatedly asks, what's a TM, a trademark? There's no I in team. To find the formula or formulaire to do the magic money spell, I looked away for a bit, and the next time I looked back over, SpongeBob and Plankton met a cosmic being that looks like a dolphin that watches over the cosmos and tells SpongeBob and Plankton to watch over Jupiter and Saturn. Then while he's gone, they're watching the two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, collide and destroy each other. The whole thing is occulted, crazy. It's just mindless, animated, quote, kiddie stuff. Don't overthink it. So that was around that time was just diving into some maritime law and some linguistics and things like that. So that was all in my frontal consciousness as I'm watching this movie. So they all kind of started connecting the dots for me. And so now we're here and we've fully watched it together as triad of a unit. So, and wow, was it a SpongeBob movie? So, Andy, did you want to say your first initial thoughts? Maybe start. I don't know if you want to start from the beginning or what stuck out to you.
Oh, sure. So my first thought when you presented that you wanted to get together and do this was that whole, I think it was like, maybe it was even a creepypasta that was out like years ago about how the 7 sins was encoded into SpongeBob, and then how you could kind of put those two together. So I think basically what it broke down to is SpongeBob is lust because he loves everybody. Patrick is obviously sloth. Plankton is envy. Mr. Krabs is obviously greed. Sandy would be pride, and you can see that a lot with like, she's from Texas, and they're always like, that's kind of a big Texas, what's the word?
Pride.
Yeah, well, it's like
Proud to be from Texas. State pride.
I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean. Like, it's a stereotype.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So Squidward would be wrath, I thought, and I think that is reflected a lot more in this movie because he ends up being a dinosaur that comes back, right? And that would be like your lizard brain would be more the wrath brain. And then Gary is glutton because he's always hungry. So
Or a glutton for punishment.
either way. Yeah, that was and then when it first opened up is like right away you see Knights Templar stuff, and I've seen a lot of nods to the Book of Revelation as well. So I was like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that."
Yep,
So,
take a page right out of the Book of Revelation.
yeah,
Yeah.
just one page.
Yeah. Alan, do you want to give your first thoughts?
My initial impressions after ending the movie.
Wherever you want to start, whatever the first thing that comes to your mind, I guess.
I had not seen this film before, and it was teased a bit to say that there's some potential esoteric secrets in this children's story. So I was already primed to look for certain things deep below the surface, reaching into our subconscious and pulling out the symbols, the sigils, the references to literature. And then the movie ended. I had some notes in my mind, and then I was a little bit angered, maybe a little bit perturbed. So if this is a children's story, and we often associate children's stories with fables and morals and lessons and bedtime stories and things that we want to teach the children. So if this SpongeBob movie is presented to children and families as a fable or as a moral lesson, then that makes me angry, because the lesson at the end of the movie is a very terrible lesson. This is not healthy thinking. This is not correct thinking. This is not in alignment with natural law. This whole movie twists concepts and presents tropes and stereotypes that are damaging to infantile minds and keeps the mind in bondage. We see the symbol of bondage when the owner, Mr. Krusty Krabs, is wearing the bondage outfit. He is in bondage, and when he's in bondage, he keeps his subservient employees also in bondage. The lesson of this film, when it ends, is that you can go through a revolution, you can go through a whole turning, you can go through a great reset, but at the end of it, once you get through it and you return to a new normal, everyone's going to go back to work. Their socioeconomic classes are going to remain the same or worse. At the bottom of this pyramid, we see a lot of triangle symbolism, pyramid symbolism, Eye of Providence, all of these references. And let it be known that the whole plot line revolves around secrets, keeping a trademark secret, and protecting that secret. You have the people of Bikini Bottom, the citizens, the sheep, the goyim, the normies, the subservient employees, the fast food workers, the factory workers, the delivery men, the UPS guy. All of these people are the foundation of the civilization to keep it going. They have such an affinity for the system. They love this system. They love their slavery, so much so that they will work on behalf of the oligarchy, of the ruling class, to return to a status quo. You take away something that they thrive on: sustenance, meat, food. This is a basic need. You take that away, and in warfare, that's called a holodomor. That's warfare. You starve the people. And when they are starving, they will do anything for food, which gets into the ideas of Lord of the Flies and cannibalism and what will you do to survive, and will you turn your back on your neighbor, your own family? It's like you'll do anything to survive. And there's this secret formula, this TM, this trademark, TM, team. We'll get into that in a little bit more, what that means. But this movie left me just angry at the infantile message for infantile minds to say, you'll go through this psychodrama, you'll form a team, you'll survive through the end, and then we'll return to exactly where we were. That's where the revolution turns 360 degrees, and you're exactly where you were before, but maybe you're poorer, maybe you're further enslaved. The cycle continues, and it's a vicious cycle. So if you have a pirate telling a story, he could be a Knights Templar, he could have gold, he could steal the booty. All of these jokes are so dry and stale at this point, being the third film in the series, that it's just a piece of propaganda. Did you guys laugh at all? Was there any really clever jokes like the original SpongeBob episodes in the first film with David Hasselhoff and all the fun and joy that you had?
Not genuinely. Some of us was so absurd. It might have got a chuckle out of me for how absurd it was, but there was no genuine laughter. So that means there was no comedy, no entertainment. There's nothing, and it was genuine.
War is hell, and this is hell in Bikini Bottom. This is their revealing of an apocalyptic doomsday scenario. We'll get into that further. I'm just left wondering, what is the point of this? Viacom, you vile scum, hiring the lowest cost animators outside of America, outside of the Western world, paying them the least amount of money to get the maximum quality visuals on the screen to then push propaganda. Ugh.
Yeah. Overall, for me, I see it as a spell within itself, a way to get people, whether it's stoners or even kids who are watching this movie, watching SpongeBob in general, to plant the seeds of this Admiralty Maritime Law-esque, oh, you gotta have faith in the system at a deeper subconscious level. And they're disguised, the icing on the cake are these overused, very dry fart jokes and disgusting imagery and so forth.
Yeah, we see that, I think, more and more. And something that made me really uncomfortable is like when it goes from 2D to 3D. I think there's something more to that, like just overall what's going on in the animation industry, moving stuff into the 3D, and then you got the time travel going on there as well, which was also interesting to kind of tie into interdimensional kind of manipulation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I just think that there's like they're trying to manifest something else by making things 3D visually.
Yeah. For me, what I always come back to when I see the push towards 3D, a lot of times these big corporations, with maritime law, it's all about corporations, it's about business. Jordan Maxwell has talked about how America is America the corporation now, and it has been since the 1800s. But these corporations, these animated corporations, come and say, "Hey, kids today, they don't want that 2D stuff that the parents of today grew up on, they want 3D animation. It's like, where are you getting those statistics? If you just keep on feeding them basic 3D animated crap, then that's all they're gonna know. If to truly know, then you would have to give them the same equivalent options of 2D animated stuff today as you are 3D animated stuff, and
Right.
then do which one is they're going to more.
That's the thread we can tug at further, this idea of 2 dimensions. In 2 dimensions, you draw a triangle, 3 points, 3 lines. When it becomes 3-dimensional, then it becomes a pyramid. Are you wearing a pyramid on your shirt? Is that the Paramount logo on your shirt, Chris?
It is not. I just it's just a random mountain and a campsite, but
Right,
I
but
put it on because
there's not a random mountain in the movie. Right. In the movie, the climax, it's that Freytag's triangle. You have the beginning, the middle, the end. You have this rising climax. You have this resolution. You have this denouement. If we're critiquing the script in terms of, well, did it follow the hero's journey? Did it follow the formula? Was this a formulaic story? Did we know how it was going to end before it began? I think so. There were no real surprises in this movie. It was exactly how we expected it to play out, which is to say, with this 3D idea, we see these symbols, we see the dolphin, he's wearing the Illuminati one eye symbolism, the eye of providence. All of these are references to greater concepts, these symbolic links to things that don't exist in the mind of the child are now placed in the mind of the child. These reference points. It becomes this invocation of a greater idea. And yet, if I ask a child, okay, so you've read Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson, right? And Robert Shea, right? So you know what the significance of that cover art is on his book Illuminatus trilogy, which features, the eye and the triangle and the dolphin imagery. All of these things are countercultural images that parents might have references to, but the child watching, no, it's just reinforcing the tropes and the stereotypes of life is bondage, it's working class wage slavery, and you're not a god. There are other gods above you. There are other rulers. There are elites. The Jordan Maxwell connection, great wisdom and knowledge. He writes a book called The Priesthood of the Illies, which gets us to Capitol Hill, where the laws are in government, Capitol Hill, the mountain. So what is that reference to the mountain in this movie?
and you talk about wanting to be God, and yet towards the end of the movie, to skip ahead a little bit to make this connection, when they're in the 3D realm and they completed their quest, they've got the formula back, and they're going to write in the page so they can go back to Bikini Bottom. The only one that doesn't want to go is Squidward, and he's strong. He's got abs. He's bigger in our realm, and
He looks like Adonis.
Yeah, he's striking the poses with his muscles and everything. And he goes, "No, I don't want to go back here. I can be a god." And then
Right.
SpongeBob goes, "Sorry, Squidward," and writes in the page and sends them all back to the status quo, which is interesting. And on the topic of Squidward, I had looked into Squidward and like the squid symbolism in some adjacent stuff for maritime law. And squid, of course, is slang for pound in money. and include ink. It helps you print money.
Oh,
But there was a
quid. Yeah.
and then ward, as in WARD, means to keep guard or protect. But in primal astrology, the squid, it's a very powerful personality archetype that can symbolize one to be checked and balanced.
Like the ward of the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it goes on to describe the personality of as the very dry humor as Squidward is, but I like to focus a minute on the check and balance thing, because who checks and balances? That's a job for a judge, right? And
Yeah.
another word for judge is executioner. And in this film, when they are about to sacrifice SpongeBob to the burger god, the gods of the Krabby Patty, who is SpongeBob's executioner? It's Squidward. So he's acting as judge. He's stepping into that archetype there.
So
we have the biblical judges too.
Yeah, or the temperance card. That would be the balance there. And then if you go back to checks and balances, well, that's why allegedly there's supposed to be checks and balances in the governmental system with the three branches, which goes back to the triangle pyramid scheme of America, or the world, I guess now. All the world is Americanized.
Do you have more to say about checks and Knights Templars?
I did have. So, and then going back to the trademark thing, when I was listening to Chris, I was like, if you take out the T and the M, it makes it Raid Ark. And then that's Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? And that whole movie was all about looking for the Holy Grail, which tied all into Knights Templar again. And then
the Holy Grail being the one Krabby Patty recipe above all recipes.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting that they had to be a pirate, because some people who look at maritime law, and people like Maxwell, instead of saying Illuminati or the dark occult magicians or whatever you want to call them, they refer to them as pirates. So I thought it was very fitting for that character to be a pirate in the movie, the Templar.
Yeah. There's a joke in the start of the movie in which the pirate he's steering the ship, and he switches over to autopilot, which is a pun on autopilot. And yet in maritime law, in the books, the law is about who's responsible for the ship. Is there a leader of the ship? Is there a captain? Who is responsible for liability? The ship itself now personified as an entity, and it has to take responsibility for itself. There's all these laws of what is international waters. I think you have to be like 24 miles. I don't know what that is in kilometers outside of the beaches of the land masses to be in a different law. And depending on the banner that you fly on your ship, that would determine the jurisdiction. So again, we're talking responsibility in piloting your own ship, your own vessel. This gets into all of the language that we're familiar with through Jordan Maxwell and others who have researched the maritime law equivalent to other ideas with strawman concepts and legal wordplay. And then again, what is TM? It could stand for trademark. It can stand for time machine. It can also stand for transcendental meditation. So if they're going through this time machine to do the transcendental meditation, because those transition scenes are very much psychedelic in a very soft, relaxed sort of way. So you have this idea of going under a spell, reprogramming yourself, bringing your mind to an idea of what will a future outcome look like. And then it becomes a desert, arid, wasteland world. Or if you go back in time to a prehistoric time and you bring back a dinosaur, a relic of the past, again, Squidward maybe being a warden of ideals. He's a musician. He likes the classical arts. He wants to protect the classical arts. Everybody calls him a dinosaur, and get with the times, old man. Get with the modern art movement and scene, which is a total farce compared to his Adonis ideal, the V line on his abs, perfect figure and perfect health. And yet, if you're eating at fast food restaurants, this is a food fight and you're a casualty of war because you eat at McDonald's, Arby's, fast food, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut all day long, chances are you're not going to have abs. You're not going to have a fit form and body. And when we go to the beach in the 3D realm, we see in the most tasteful way female bikini bottoms and slender ideal figures. So there is an ideal form. There is beauty in art. And SpongeBob references it, acknowledges it, but then they go for this modern 3D and CGI, computer generated imagery, graphics, as opposed to a very classical hand-drawn animation. You recall Disney with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Fantasia and the beauty of hand-painted cells. And yet that just costs too much. We're going to cut costs, maximize profits, and give you modern art.
Yeah. Andy, do you have anything to say with
Totally.
that?
Yeah. So going back to the whole time machine thing. So I was noticing the time machine ran on hot dogs, and I was like, well, what's that all about? So then I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I was like, oh, well, if we're going maritime law, they're Franks. So it's the Swiss time machine or a Swiss watch. And then it also ran off of kelp soda, which is iodine or seaweed. So now they're starting to have a market on marijuana in America. It's becoming more and more legalized in more places. So if you put weed into the sea to fund your time machine in Switzerland, then that's kind of a wink and a nod to that. And it's like,
So you're
obviously not for
saying
kids
we
to
weren't
know.
high enough to enjoy this Pineapple Express experience? Is this just a stoner movie?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Andy, because where I'm at, they just last week passed to legalize marijuana, and it was all over the news. It's going to take about a year for it to the law to get into effect. But people at my 9 to 5 job was they're a bit older than I am and everything, and they like reading up on all the news stories and all this stuff that's going on in our local government and stuff more so than I do. And I couldn't really care much less either way. But one of them was going on about the law to make it legal recreationally. Has all these other caveats, little laws attached to it. So if this got passed, and all this other stuff is going to go through, and she didn't want all the other stuff.
Who can grant a right and who can take a right away?
I was thinking of the
Again,
word
natural law.
pirate. The word pirate is pyrite.
Oh,
That's fool's gold, man. Pirate is fool's gold.
I like that.
Yeah. Also on the topic of Squidward, I love it to kind of dovetail Squidward's
Squidosaurus Rex, you mean?
Squidosaurus Rex. Since he is, the warden of money, in a sense. He's even the cash register. He's the first person that you go to when you go to the Krusty Krab. So there was that. That is, there it is again, and you can see that he kind of despises SpongeBob because of his whole imagination. Like the whole imagination thing with SpongeBob, he doesn't like his laughter and his playfulness and everything that SpongeBob is and stands for, his usefulness. And then you have Squidward, who is very dry, he doesn't have any hope or anything. He just does what he needs to do to live by, and he's kind of miserable all the time and all this. And SpongeBob couldn't care less about money when Squidward just lived just for a paycheck, basically. And so to me, it's almost like they're the same character, just at different times of their lives, right? So it's like money will turn the useful, imaginative child into this very Squidward-like character once they grow up and buy into maritime law and
or
sign up
become
for
a
it.
sellout.
Yeah. And then that's interesting with Squidward because he's the cashier, like that you brought that up. And then if you're saying he represents wrath, which would be more of a Mars energy, that's the cash register in the Krusty Krab is a boat. So he's the driving force is Mars, or your Mars energy, your action, to get your transactional marriage in place, which is be another TM.
Yeah. Speaking of bondage,
I'll cover my ears for this one.
Speaking of bondage, that's another thing that piqued my interest where I was watching it with you guys, was as their SpongeBob is trying to sing to Plankton to have them form their team, their TM. It made me, and since we was taking this at a maritime law direction, I was thinking of the marriage and how that is.
It's a contract. That's a business agreement.
It's a contract to make two products, because when you have a birth certificate, as Maxwell has said, that you become a product once you have your birth certificate. And marriage is combining those two products under one corporation, to summarize it. And one of the words he focuses on is partnership. And so when SpongeBob was singing to try to get them to form the team, he said the word partnership and partners multiple times throughout his singing, and so
Yeah.
it got me to think about this, the marriage side of things. He wanted to have that contract with Plankton to
I have a
you know,
question.
yes.
How do sponges sexually procreate?
I don't know. SpongeBob has parents in the show, so
Well, isn't it an asexual reproduction?
I think so.
So if SpongeBob exists in his mind, we go into his mind and it's all playful, it's all rainbows. It's not necessarily a gay or a gray sexual area. It's like he is a child. He is prepubescent. He's not thinking about adult themes. He goes to the beach. He sees bikini bottoms on female forms and male bodies, and he's not ogling. It doesn't matter to him. It's not catching his attention. He's this child. And is he our hero? Is he our fool in this story?
Oh yeah, he's definitely the fool.
yeah.
And I like you brought up his brain. I kept thinking confections every time. And then I thought confections, convection. So it's like cooking up things, cooking up this imagination land, really. And how, yeah, he doesn't have any other interests than just to go to work, but he's just there because he likes it, when he doesn't really know why he likes working.
Yes, and perhaps if this is the Crowleyan age of the crown and conquering child, and SpongeBob is the asexual prepubescent child forever into adulthood, he goes and works at the Krabby Patty, and for him he's playing in the kitchen. If there are alchemical recipes and deep esoteric secrets, and you have to be 40 years old to study the Kabbalah and understand all of the meanings of all the significances of all the references, they're not in his mind, they're not in his brain. He's not thinking about those things. If he were to have that secret recipe in his mind, if he were to memorize it, he wouldn't know what it means. He follows the directions, he does as he's told. So I mentioned Kabbalah, we mentioned Viacom, and there are terrible, terrible things being said about a certain business type person in the entertainment industry and the handlers. And viewed through that lens, I was already predisposed to seeing certain imagery in the film. And this is where it gets controversial and spicy, and we really can't talk about this. Did you see what was on the marquee on the theater? Once they entered the 3D realm, they go down easy breezy street. He's in a ship. The pirate ship has wheels on it, so it goes from the sea to the land. The laws change, the rules change. Sure. He goes down breezy street, and there's a theater, and they're having a film festival because we're breaking the third wall. We're seeing the movie within the movie, the story within the story. And for a moment, I did see on the marquee the words referencing a shoal, which it's a shallow water, SHOAL. A large number of fish swimming as a group. This is a teamwork again reference. Piranhas often feed in shoals. This is in this language. There's a pun here, there's a joke. And yet, what I initially saw and wrote a note down was when part of the word was obscured. Do you know what that word would be? If we take the L off the end of shoal, we have show, showa. What is a showa? It's a story, perhaps, that's told over and over again. The definition of Shoah in Hebrew is catastrophe. So they're bringing in catastrophism into this story. And I have to know that that was intentional, to reference the idea of Shoah, to bring about the idea of Holocaust and Holodomor and starvation of a people. And it's this sort of a worldview violence that perpetuates. There's other ideas that could be explored from that angle, because that gets us to, well, the Holocaust and World War II. And why did we fight this war? Well, because Hitler and Nazism. And the film goes on to reference World War II. They all are enlisted into this war and they wear the costumes, which is interesting because there's a reference towards the end of the film. It's a throwaway remark when they take the costume off, and the other guy is like, what you mean we can just take these costumes off at any time? Meaning we can change these roles that we're playing at any time? And they go on from that thought.
But it took Mr. Krabs to rip his off first. That's what made them realize that they could take off.
He removes his bondage gear.
Yep. And another line from the war scene that caught my attention, it was kind of a throwaway line as well, is when they're trying to defend against Plankton coming in to steal the formula at the beginning, and SpongeBob is in the bearing shooting, and Patrick is right beside him. And right when Plankton starts to use his mecha, and Patrick sees it, Patrick goes, "Oh, I just remembered, I actually don't work for Mr. Krabs," and leaves his hat, his war hat and everything with SpongeBob and just runs away. And that's
Yeah, like a
interesting
soldier going AWOL, away while on leave. And then you have the ideas of Navy men. They submerge, or they come up from the depths of the ocean in their submarine. They go into a dock, and then they go and they have shore leave. There's all sorts of references to naval intelligence, perhaps, and the key in Patrick's belly button. That's a big spoiler. He has the key to the mysteries around his neck, and it slides down his chest, and then the key goes into his navel, his belly button, where all the lint is. What secrets does that unlock? If you get through in a marriage, right? How do you get to the heart of a man, right? You make him a hearty meal, you feed him, and he'll love you forever. He'll love his wife forever. What are the gender roles in this story?
Yeah, that is interesting as well, because the only really core female character you have at least in this movie is Sandy, and she's not in it as much as you would think. It's very male dominated film in its core cast. Andy, did you have anything else?
Oh yeah. um, going back to the signs when they get into the 3D world, there's one sign that says high tide travel, and it's right when they're kind of fighting the pirate in the background. And I thought, okay, high, put marijuana into the sea, right? And tide, well, you're all tied up. And then to ravel, that's also to tie you up. Instead of unraveling something, you're raveling it up. So
yeah, that's that symbol of being tied up or imprisoned or stuck in a bubble. Sometimes that hermetically sealed atmosphere that we have. Our chipmunk, is she a squirrel? Sandy
Cheeks.
Sandy Cheeks, right. She's the opposite of the fish out of water. She's the mammal forced to live under the sea, and she has to make all these concessions, and it's difficult for a mammal, a landlubber, to live under the sea. She has to breathe oxygen. She needs these basic needs met to be able to function. And she has the last Krabby Patty, and she takes that for granted. She eats it quickly, only to wish later that she would have eaten more slowly to savor the flavor and enjoy it. That bubble symbolism, that spaceman helmet she wears to go under the sea, is very telling. A lot of conspiracy theorists would say, oh, space is water. That's why they wear the same kind of helmet. The bubble symbolism for me in this film that is unique would have to be the idea of, maybe it's a reference to The Wizard of Oz, where there's a giant bubble or something, like a bubble of protection, a hedge of protection, this soft womb-like place that you can go to and be protected. But when we're talking financial warfare, food warfare, manipulation of markets, checks and balances, Knights Templar,
Commercial
all of this.
warfare.
Well, this gets us to the idea of a bubble in a financial economy, in a stock and bondage market. We had the 1999 dot-com bubble. We had the housing market bubble burst in 2008. We are now in a perpetual recession, whatever that means. The definition of what a recession is has changed in 2021 and 2022. So there's all of these references to ideas who are not fully fleshed out. If they're trying to embody an idea, this film keeps the minds of men in the shallow end.
Yes. And I pulled this quote. It caught my eye shortly before we watched the movie, and it has new meaning now after watching this movie a little bit.
Is the quote, every man is an island?
Yeah, as SpongeBob says, every man is island. It's a quote from Jesus, and he says, "Come ye after me, and I'll make you the fishers of men." And that caught my attention when I heard it, because Fisherman Price, who makes kids toys, kids merchandise, Fisherman Price.
Oh.
That's
And so
yeah, what's the cost of the SpongeBob merchandise?
yeah,
And Fisher Price. Mm-hmm.
the merchant dice.
Yeah, the
merchandise. Yeah.
Gamble.
Yeah, I got my merchandise here. I support the Vile Viacom.
yeah.
It's a SpongeBob alarm clock.
The amount of money made off of these Chinese merchandise sold to Americans at top dollar. I tell you, man, 1999, that project launches, and 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, that stuff was hot. People were wearing SpongeBob t-shirts everywhere. Everything was SpongeBob. And now they're milking this dry. This franchise. Does it have any legs to stand on? The creator has passed on to the other side, and they continue to breathe life into this dead fish.
I just searched SpongeBob really quickly today, just to see if there's any recent headlines or anything. And apparently the someone at Nickelodeon who obviously worked for Viacom, since Nickelodeon is just a branch on the whole Viacom tree, said that SpongeBob is contracted till at least 2025. So they're going to at least be making new SpongeBob material for our viewing unpleasure, at least until 2025. And going back to the whole, so that gets us back to the whole contract thing and the power of the book. Not only did you have the formula written on paper, but you also had the Templar book that the pirate had, that he was rewriting the story, so that was very almost kind of mocking conspiracy theorists in a way, I guess you could say, of the secret pirate rewriting the history of events and everything. Oh, this is where the story ends.
Right. And they reference Mr. Nutter being a crazy person. You'd be a crazy conspiracy theorist. You're a nutter if you believe some of these ideas.
Yes. And
and
then the last paper thing that contract thing that I noticed was when Mr. Krabs asked SpongeBob, he freaked out because the formula's missing. He goes, well, Sponge, my boy, you probably memorized the formula by now. And SpongeBob pulls out his contract that he signed when he started to work at Krusty Krab. It goes, actually, Mr. Krab, in the fine print, it tells me that I cannot memorize it. It cannot be saved in my memory under contract. And he reads the fine print and pulls out the magnifying glass.
Yeah. Going back to nuts, there's a line that Sandy says, and she's like, I'm out of nuts. And which is funny because she's the only female character, right? But she tends to be throughout the series a little bit more masculine, and she's the only mammal, so that kind of puts her in this anima kind of type area. But then in maritime law, that meant that she doesn't have an alibi. She has no testimony. She doesn't have a testament anymore.
She has no testicles. She has no nuts.
No nuts.
Mm.
And at the same time, you got all the balls, all these balls, cannonballs and bubbles.
Cannonballs and bubbles, yes.
And so it's at that point when they're all, the balls are in the air, and then what does that mean when you're in the court? Well, then it's anybody's game.
I like that. Sports metaphor is delicious. I'm glad we're all on the same team and we're playing together. That's a home run, Andy. Great job.
Thank you.
Nice job. And I also like what you said when Andy, when we were watching it, you said team backwards is meat.
Yeah, just screwed around a little bit.
Anagrams are important.
Yeah.
And
Sandy also says, going back to your Jesus reference, she's, when she goes all conspiratorial and she's yelling at everybody, she says, there'll be Krabby Patties coming from the sky. So then I immediately wrote that down because I was like, oh, it's like manna from heaven. And then nobody believes her that could be real. And maybe it could be a real thing.
Yeah, that's trusting that your needs will be met with an abundance mentality. And the way that this Showa goes down, the things go south in the civilization, the society collapses due to the programming of it. They are warning you that it's going to happen, and it happens, and these are the roles you play. We have the Mad Max films, we have the Rambo reference where he puts on that blood red band, and he starts shooting the machine guns, and they're playing with the guns, and it's like war's hell. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's going to be the cycles of it, and we can't get out of those cycles. We can't escape it. And I was just really hoping that when they started shooting cannonballs, that they'd reference Cannonball Run, and they'd have a semi-truck chase, and they'd have contraband patties, and it could be a lot of fun. There could be a lot of fun had in this movie, and yet left me high and dry.
Yeah. And they did reference Airplane when they said hold the mayo, and then the guns were shooting ketchup and mustard. So that tells you that nightshade or belladonna, which is now used in some naturopathic medicines, and then mustard gas are your weapons, your bioweapons.
Oh, that's dark.
Mayo Clinic is what was the original reference in Airplane, and that's what I tend to always think of since I lived near there. Whenever Mayo is referenced, and there's a past episode way back when they ask if mayo is mayonnaise is an instrument, and then you have a bomb underneath the mayonnaise that spills all over, and where Mayo Clinic is located, the nickname of the town is Med City. So then you got kind of the whole Medici cult of that spilling out everywhere. And I've always kind of wondered if, because Rochester does have skyways and they also have subways. So I've wondered if there might be actual weapons there.
That's a very fair question, and that gets back to the hermetically sealed environments that our Sandy character lives in. Rochester being in southern Minnesota, we get rain and snow, and part of the year you just don't want to be going outside. It's just too wet, too cold. So you can live in your hermetically sealed passages and live comfortable without having to go to the surface.
Right, and it's a huge hub for international medicine. It's also the first doctors that had patients come to them instead of them go to the patients. So I think there's a lot more going on there.
And the reason they go there to receive treatment and prescriptions for what trademarked, trade secret, pharmaceutical, potions, formulas, medications, and treatments. And recently on Twitter, the blue checkmark fiasco was Eli and Lilly, basically that company that releases the insulin or holds on to this insulin. This is a life or death secret recipe. And if the tweet was a joke saying, we're releasing insulin for free, gotcha, no, we're charging more than ever, people are very upset about that.
Yeah. I was waiting during SpongeBob speech. I was waiting for him to say, "Give me liberty."
Libre, that's the book. There's a page from the book. Libre is a book. And if we're talking about history books, they're rewriting history. They're rewriting the script of the movie as it goes on. This is pretty basic plot trope stuff, none too surprising, but again, they reinforce that idea. The moldable minds of children who have not seen these ideas before will soak it all in like a sponge, without question, without criticism, without having media literacy to understand what they're taking in, reinforcing these tropes and things. And the question in their mind will be, well, why is there a talking dolphin, and what is naval intelligence, and who are the intelligentsia, and what are all these visual references, and why did the story unfold in this way? There are no clues. It's not a hermetically sealed film. You're going to be left confused if you don't have references to the greater culture. I don't
Yeah.
know if a child will watch this movie and then ask, "Hey, mom, hey, dad, I've got questions. Can you explain this to me?"
Yeah, the whole, and the reason why I brought the whole liberty thing is because in maritime, when a sailor leaves and sets sail, he gains liberty but loses his freedom under maritime law.
Right.
And that's why the Statue of Liberty isn't on land, as people like Maxwell has said. And
Right.
so since we had all these famous quotes being re-uttered throughout SpongeBob and other, speeches that they had scattered out through the film to motivate the other characters. I was waiting for that one, and that was the one that never came.
Right. It seems the message of this film is more of a communitarianism, communism, socialism sort of thing. They give you this message of, well, we need to work together. We
Yeah.
need,
Yeah.
well, yeah, you're working together, but whose orders are you following when you're working together? There's this top-down approach to what they're doing. They're following these orders. They are order followers. They are not sovereign men.
Yeah.
There's a hierarchy, and they're keeping the hierarchy just the way it is.
Yeah.
That goes back to the TM song, and SpongeBob turns into a hammer. He says, "I'll be the hammer, you be the nail." Well, if we're looking at SpongeBob as lust, and then Plankton is envy, you got this weird desire concept going back and forth as like a mutilated kind of desire. It's not a pure of heart desire that's kind of helping this thing along. And at the end of the song, he has a little bubble pop up with a question mark, which looks like a sickle, and he takes the sickle away. And so
I was looking for the sickle, and all I got were two creepy female popsicles threatening to melt, making an asexual sponge feel really uncomfortable.
Was that
Yeah.
a Shining reference? I was feeling that may have been a Shining reference.
The twins,
of the
children,
twins.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's such a thinly veiled reference. A lot of times, I don't even know if I'd have to give myself too much credit for seeing something that isn't there. That's what we're kind of doing. We're looking for all these clues. And you show this film at a family gathering, like you had mentioned in the introduction, and it's just background imagery playing to entertain the children as a babysitter of sorts.
Yeah.
They're not
I
gonna
think
come away with this message of, man, the hammer, the sickle, the socialism, the communitarianism, the one world government, the Illuminati symbolism. Yeah, maybe this movie had a message which is against us. It's not serving us. It's not benefiting us. It's not giving us a positive lesson. It's giving us a lesson that we are under control. The eye in the triangle, the eye of providence, all of these occult symbolisms. Vigilant Citizen could probably write the most ferocious, fear-inducing essay on this film. Christian parents would probably see all the satanic, occult, dark, devilish, bondage, weird sexual pride stuff, references to the Christ killers and the genocide and the Holocaust and the Holodomor and the war and all these adult concepts in a children's film. And they'd be like, we'll pass. We don't need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think pretty much my opinion on the film and all the information I got when I first saw the pieces of it at the family event I was at was pretty much all the gist that I needed. Rewatching it with you guys was I was pretty much was just reinforcing that same information. There wasn't anything added by watching the full length feature with you guys for me personally, besides watching it with you guys to record this, obviously.
Right. It's like, again, this metaphor of you have this property, you poop something out, and now you polish the turd, you make it real shiny, and then you pass it to somebody, and you're like, well, be thankful we polished this turd for you. I mean, it's still a turd. And they have all this potty humor, the whole idea of the photo booth being the time machine, being toilets where they flush the toilet. I mean, you might connect that to Belphegor and the Throne and Back to the Future, where Doc Martin's on the toilet and he gets this idea of like time travel and, gigawatts and flux capacitors, which are in that triangle shape. It's all of these references to movies that handle these concepts far better. This is just the trickle down effect of the worst possible filter of ideas, lacking any sort of fun and creativity, clearly a corporate product. And then I guess I'm at the end of my notes here. The only thing that we haven't really discussed is the potential of predictive programming. This movie was released 2015. We're talking about it 7 years later. And there's color symbolism that might be referencing certain events that happen down the road, building affinity to the colors gold and blue. There's a reference to like the Titanic in the film, saying like civilization is going to have the sunk cost fallacy because we're investing too much in these ideas, so we just got to let them go. People are going to die. There's a Jonah and the whale reference. They're inside the belly of a fish, a vessel. They're traveling. Patrick wears a dunce cap. Of course, that's not going to be a reference to a confederacy of dunces because this is not a literate film. They're not referencing literature for children to read. There's a reference to New York City, the World Trade Center complex. Will they show you the One World Trade building in a postcard? Owning all the farmland, referencing, Bill Gates' plan to own all the farmable land is referenced at some point too. And then again, it comes back to this key idea of meat makes your muscles strong with protein. If you don't have a source of protein, you're not going to eat plankton. You're not going to eat algae. You're not going to be a strong man. You're not going to be capable of enlisting and fighting in a war. You're not going to be buff like Rambo. You're going to be induced with sonic warfare weapons on the streets when you go out to riot. Civilization will collapse. Black Lives Matters will riot. They won't be prosecuted. There won't be rule of law. That will be a doomsday scenario. That will be an apocalyptic doomsday scenario. There's also the pun of the meat eater, the meteor might be a break off of a chunk of rock from space when the planets collide and they hit Earth, going back to catastrophism, going back to the idea of can we even say a Jewish subversion idea of a certain group of people being a scapegoat. These are all the ideas at play again and again and again. And I'm at the point where I'm tired of those stories. They show us the way out in this film, which is to write your own story. There's the joke about write yourself a happy ending. There's a sexual fulfillment. There's the idea of William Reich studying the psychology of fascism, tying it to orgasm and withholding that. You have the countercultural ideas with transcendental meditation, new age ideas, the sexual revolution, this promiscuity, the end times, and finally ending with a flood. If there's a Noahide law, if there's a Shoah, if there's all these layers of religious text and law, the Bible, the Torah, the book of law, the book of Numbers, the Judges. You have all this biblical reference to sacrifice and who can eat meat and who can sacrifice an animal at the temple. These are ancient ideas. They're presented in a new form. We can write our own gospel. We can write our own story. We can escape from this hermetically sealed reality that they've built for us. And yet it's up to us to become adults, to take responsibility, to choose the battles we fight, and to
Turn off the
choose
SpongeBob TV.
tune out of it. Absolutely.
Grow some
Yeah.
balls.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you say write your own story. I like that because I did an impromptu interview discussion with Stein from the Greenhorn Painting podcast, where we talked about the cult magics of Hollywood. And my final thoughts at the end of our interview, he asked if I had any last words, and that was the last word I left with everyone in that discussion. I said to just write your own story. Don't let these magicians and directors and producers and corporations, these groups, Hollywood, write your story for you.
Right.
You can do it yourself. So I really like that you said that here. And to go off a little bit before we pass it off to Andy, you said a couple of things that I had actually written down in my notes that I wanted to kind of tag on there at the end, and that was you talked about the twins in SpongeBob's dream head imagination, and where we get the word like ceremony and cerebellum comes from lock or flowing water, Sarah. So ceremony, ceremony, and as we mentioned marriage earlier, that binds two products together, as I said. But Sarah also, like biblically, you have the marriage of Sarah and Abram, and that's where you can say we get the idea of the cerebellum, the cerebrum, your Christ consciousness, your Godhead, if you will, which so your cerebellum can see as an eternal alchemical marriage within yourself. And we're talking about that brings us back to the whole thing of checks and balances. Your Godhead, your Christ consciousness, when you're fully balanced, when you check yourself and you balance yourself, and you're in that Christ consciousness, well balanced state, you have that's when you're sovereign. You're most sovereign, because you don't need the laws of the sea to be under them anymore. You don't have to understand them anymore, because you're understanding, you're overstanding, you're standing by self, you're standing with God. And the last thing that made me think of is the whole thing of marriage and twins. We had Plankton and SpongeBob, as I was talking about briefly at the beginning of this, when they go to meet the celestial dolphin Bubbles, whose name was Bubbles. who had the Illuminati eye and all that on his thing, as Alan mentioned.
Beautifully voiced by Matt Berry, the best part of the movie for me.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, he has to go to the restroom, and he tasks Plankton and SpongeBob to watch Jupiter, Saturn, and like, well, first he just tasks them to watch over everything, and they're like, oh, what should we be looking at? We don't know what we should be watching for. And as they say we don't know what we should be watching for, you see SpongeBob eye gets memorized, it's reflecting the galaxy. And he goes, okay, well, this is a lot. So Plankton, you look over here at this planet, and I look over here at this planet, which just happens to be Jupiter and Saturn. And as they're sitting there watching, that's when they collide and destroy each other. On our Weaving Spiders discussion, when this got briefly brought up, our good friend Gabe's like distant. I cast him because I figured he probably would have known. I at the time I couldn't figure out why they would have Jupiter and Saturn crash into it. What was the symbology of that? And to reference him, his answer on the Weaving Spider scene that night, he synchronistically he just happened to be looking at Jupiter and Saturn in his own work, and he had mentioned in the what was it, when was the last election, 2020? Is that when the last election was? That the astrologically, that was a movement during that election where Jupiter and Saturn passed each other, and it was like they gave a kiss. The I do kiss, the marriage kiss.
It's the Great Conjunction, which is the Star of Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're talking about that, because I was going to make a point about that as well.
Great. And Gay mentioned that when that happened during the election, that was the embodiment of, the Donald and Biden kind of switcheroo they kind of did there. And also Jupiter and Saturn is Joaquin and Boaz, the two pillars. So that gets us back to the twins. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that a little bit. I thought that was fascinating. And so Andy, what did you have on that?
So yeah, it was pretty interesting, considering like how they didn't know what to look at, and then when they did, SpongeBob kind of decided, oh, I'm gonna look at these two planets, right? And then his eyes got all big, and it's so funny because when that was going on, I can still remember there's some spots here where the sky is, very visible, and I had never obviously seen that before when they were coming together, and I was just like driving and being like, wow, that's cool. So that's why I flashed my tattoo. I was like, that's why I got this tattoo. But yeah, I think that kind of goes back to predictive programming too. Like, here they are, this grand conjunction is happening, we got this kind of political theater going on. We have the dolphin, who I think is supposed to be encoding the Dauphine of France, which is still a title that they give to people. And I think that's kind of obviously with the dolphin being like the overseer or whatever, that's who everybody's answering to, really. And if you look up even the crest for the Dauphine, it has dolphins on it, and it also has the cape thing like he was wearing. So it's kind of like he controls the veil, or there's something about it. But I was reading a little bit when we took a break about him, and it was like his whole political thing is like he's into the monarchy coming back into power. So that was really interesting to read, especially after watching this movie.
Was there gold and blue on that crest?
Yes, and white.
So to
Gold.
make it explicitly clear, when SpongeBob becomes a superhero, he changes his profile, his avatar on his social media to show the colors gold and blue to stand in solidarity with, I don't know what that could possibly mean in the current year.
Yeah. Anything else, Andy?
Oh, I did want to just say one more thing about when SpongeBob takes that question mark down, and so it represents the sickle. Well, then there's the next scene, or shortly after, you see Patrick. Well, he's a star. You got the star, the hammer, and the sickle. Well, he also had a hammer on his head. But if you take the sickle away, that means there's no death anymore. So I think with the 2D into 3D thing, that's kind of, they're wanting people to obviously get more into this metaverse, this VR thing. And what the real currency there is your time. And you were talking about standing and everything, and it's standing attention, like in the military. So they're taking your attention and your standing, your understanding of everything, and they're just using it to give to what, a dolphin guy, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that can be tied into the reason why they also had the whole thing with the time machine as well.
Right. And with the no death, it reminds me of that show Sword Art Online, where they get stuck, or like Ready Player One, where they get stuck in the game, and then if they die in the game, they die in real life. Except for, I think they're kind of trying to get to where people don't have a natural physical death. I've thought that for a long time, and that goes back to Revelation. Is it's revealed that death is the final enemy, and I think a lot of people think that, or kind of interpret it as, you shouldn't want to die, but I think you are supposed to want to not be in your physical body, because you're supposed to be of the world, so your light body, and not your physical body, which is a whole other discussion. But it's a good point to make, because I think the whole immortality culture is another important discussion to have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think of the movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis. I think there's a bunch of movies that have a similar story, but that one it always kind of sticks in my mind out of the movies with that theme. And I think you're right. Also Adventure Time and their special, their Distant Land special, they had very similar story where the villain wanted to break the cycle of life and death, break that organic cycle, break out of it. And so I think you're understanding, we see this theme throughout all of Hollywood. Those are just to name a few. And I haven't thought it to the extent of you did, but when I thought of the whole why they're pushing 3D animation, especially on kids, is I think it's to make them not be able to really notice or care and just be numb to the uncanny valley of it. Because no matter how realistic 3D animation will ever get, there will always be an uncanny valley because it doesn't have breath of the creator. It doesn't have the hand of God in it. So we're going to notice that.
Right.
And so to get us to kind of be oversaturated with it, so our brains just get so numb to seeing that lifelessness and things like that. Let's show all these little kids in their infantile brains as they're so developing all these uncanny valley imagery through these movies and shows and games and whatnots.
Right. And what is a Nickelodeon? The original meaning of the word Nickelodeon is cheap entertainment, nickel and dimed.
Yes.
So
this cultural export of America means that America is the great Satan to a lot of parts of the world. This corruption of the minds of children being an export. The final thought now, after reflecting a little further, the idea of, well, this animation export with its 3D imagery, this worldview, this idea of worldview warfare and having an affinity towards the blue and the gold, the Ukraine, the flag, choosing an allegiance, choosing a side, exporting the propaganda. There's a really quick reference, blink and you miss it, to the idea of a cargo cult. They drop in the tartar sauce, the idea being you have a tribe, they've not witnessed any Western man, they don't know what a aeroplane is, and the cargo is dropped into their village from above, from the sky, as if it's from the gods above. They receive this item, whatever it is, food, maybe it's delicious chocolate or some Western export that they didn't have before. They become addicted to it, like a Krabby Patty, and they want more of it. And what do they have to do to get another export of this manna from heaven? They have this cargo cult that forms around it. So they'll do strange rituals and dancing. They'll put on masks. They'll do whatever they think they can to have the next shipment of the export of the cargo dropped in their lap. And I thought that was a perfect encapsulation of what is going on with this Hollywood Babylon export. And, Gary is a god, the snail god. They will worship the snail god. That was a brilliant story arc for Gary the Snail. And I'm so glad he got the recognition of his divinity in this film.
Yeah. That's interesting. My thought, and I don't think this was meant to be this. It was just my brain. That's where my brain went to, is when they was dropping that tartar sauce. I thought maybe is that. I thought in my brain I knew it wasn't, but I remember I was like, what if that is a reference to like Tartarian, like
the new Tartarian video just dropped. We have to watch it immediately.
And
You're a nutter if you don't.
Because the whole idea of Atlantis and it sinking to the sea, the tartar sauce is sinking to the bottom of the sea before it explodes. And as a joke, because I don't take the new Tartarian cult, I guess you can call it, of people that are all about that stuff too seriously. I
to be a way to rewrite history, to explain some facts and details and say, here's a new narrative. I'm going to sell you a new book about it. It's difficult to ingest some of that stuff. I'm going to get scurvy if I don't have my vitamin C, if I don't get my holy C.
I'm gonna so what I do is I kind of make light of it and make a joke. So I always go, oh, everyone is talking with that tartar sauce. So that's just been a recurring joke for me. So when
Yep.
they dropped the tartar sauce, I was like, oh, that's hilarious. But also, I think it's interesting that we had a pirate in here, as we mentioned, and it wasn't Patchy the pirate. If you watch the early SpongeBob episodes from
Miss
like
Patchy.
season 1,
It's an
one of the
imitation pirate.
when the Patchy the pirate, who is played by Tom Kenny in person, who voices SpongeBob, but apparently SpongeBob, I read this thing that SpongeBob's newer laugh is different from his old laugh that we see even in this movie, because the strain on Tom Kenny's vocal cords, and he's getting older. He's been doing this for decades now. So I thought that was interesting, but also the fact that it wasn't Patchy, it was this new Templar pirate, because Patchy is a SpongeBob fan. He would write into SpongeBob. He collected SpongeBob merchandise.
Fan
And what
fiction.
a cap and the word captain in maritime comes from the word capital. Or vice versa. I mean, I said that backwards, but you get what I'm saying. Like a captain has rolls over his shipment, his cargo, his merchandise, and so you have Patrick the pirate captain rolling over the SpongeBob merchandise. Was that almost like a Disney adult, but a Viacom adult, I guess you could call it.
Right. Like this is like The Simpsons for kids is like when I'm getting, because all the predictive programming and stuff. Not to interrupt you, but that's
yeah,
you're fine.
the build back better. No, I'm sorry, it's a tongue twister. It's Burger Beard's Beard Burger. Can you say that? Burger Beard's Beard Burger. The BBBBB. The Better Business Burrow. The build back better. There it is.
Bubbles.
Bubbles.
Blow bubbles better.
And then Patchy, he had a black beard, so it's like, oh, we were in the black, but it was Patchy, and now we got a red beard captain, and our ship is sinking.
So if we're in the black, it's Black Friday, we made a profit. Or wait, is it red? Are we in debt again? I am forever in debt to Chris and Andy for being such gracious hosts. I have my final word on my tongue, but I'm holding it.
Yeah, let's. I think I'm pretty much done with my notes. There wasn't much here, because it's very surface level. It was very shallow. But this was a fun discussion to kind of show people, these trickle down themes, as Alan has mentioned it, how it can still plant seeds in the subconscious to carry these themes. Once a spell has been cast, a sigil has been made, you don't have to work on it as hard the next time. So they've been doing this so many times. By the time we get to the SpongeBob movie, they're like, you don't have to worry about it.
Yes, they can make one reference to chaos theory and chaos magic by having one little symbol on a wall on a conspiracy pin board connecting all the crimes together, just in one scene.
It wasn't even right. It was 5 arrows.
That seems more chaotic to me than anything else.
Yeah. So final thoughts. Amy, did you want to go first?
Sure. I think the main thing is, like you guys were saying, like everybody has the power to burn down their own super fish pail, and you don't really need to watch or have your kids, or if somebody else, you're at somebody else's house and their kids are watching this, maybe read them a book or hang out with them a little bit. Like that's way better for them than watching this kind of garbage. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, really quick before I pass it off to Alan, I just saw in my notes I skipped over this part. I made a joke early in the film when the Templar pirate is reading the story at the beginning. He's talking to seagulls, and so the Templar pirate, the guy that is rewriting the book, who has this magical book with the story in it. The story is take on the task of the story writer of these secrets. Is talking to the birds, and
The language of the birds.
it's the language of the birds, the one that holds the secrets, who knows what maritime law actually is, can then go on beyond it and speak green language, the language of the birds, because you don't see any other character reacting from the birds.
Right.
You just see the pirate do so. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, Alan, any final thoughts?
The final cryptic clues to the puzzle. Bill Nye is to science what Captain Kangaroo is to maritime law. Read your children The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Show them that 2 + 2 = 42. It's the answer to the life, the universe, and everything. And so long, and thanks for all the tartar sauce.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you guys for listening and to this episode. And apologies if you actually did watch the SpongeBob movie for this, to make sure to see what we were talking about. It was not a requirement to watch that before you watch this video. If you did, apologies, but thank you for being that dedicated to wanting to watch our SpongeBob Maritime Law discussion. And thank you for alanmarcus.com and Andy for coming on and talking about it with me. My next video after this one will be my Pinocchio homunculus video. Andy may or may not be there. I think she said she was a possibility she might join for that discussion. But at the moment, it looks like it's just going to be me and Joshua the Branch. Alan, if you want to come in, he could as well. Anyone's invited, but it'll just be a Pinocchio homunculus, magic wood, the secrets of wood, and all the things that come to 2022, and why I've joked that 2022 is the year of Pinocchio. We'll be watching the third and final Pinocchio movie that came out this year, Del Toro's Pinocchio. And we're talking about it and many more. So that will be coming next, or if you're watching this video in the future, then look for that one. That one's going to be another amazing discussion, as this one was. I'm so grateful for Alan and Andy and everyone who listened. So much more to come. Thanks. And do you guys want to promote anything here at the end?
alanmarcus.com.
Saturday nights, Weaving Spiders. Wednesday nights, Flow State. If you follow Chris, you probably know where to find that.
Yep. Weaving Spider Saturdays as always. Well, that's a wrap on episode 3 of King of Cups. See you guys next time.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.